niepotrzebne jak powietrzu tlen. Po pierwsze sam to jest selekta co numery do grania wybiera. Najpierw piosenka, a potem wersja, czyli rytm, na którym kładzie swój vibe. A DJ, czyli ktoś to zacnie nawija, a single, czyli ktoś to własno zaśpiewa. Jeśli to lubisz, zawołaj kulak, to selekta zagra to jeszcze raz. Masz wersję jak na wojnie, radzisz sobie sam. Jeden freestyluje, drugi śpiewa to co ma. Nie showcase, tylko sound system style. Na innych rydymach numery graj. Pamiętaj jakie scena taką żenę ma. Joint Venture sound system, pierwsza ekipa. Zaraz obok LSM, prosto z Lublina. DJ Jasman, drugi klient, młodzi urządza. Skupy ściany dźwięku, sound systemu gra. A kosmosa system pierwszy nagłośnienie ma. Potem raz bas różni walidacji DJ-a. Trzęsie się od basów, CD-ku już podłoga. Nie pytaj nas, co to za beat i dlaczego słyszałeś na nim już nie jeden hit. Co to za beat? Czemu kradniecie komuś hity? Taka kultura, taki to zwyczaj, że jeden rydym robi dla wielu DJ-ów każdy go mebluje jak mu podpowiada nos. Każdy go ujeżdża jak na rodeo redneck June. I każda wersja dodaje nowe dźwięki na rytmu tu. To jest sound, edukacja i tańcy. Selekta stara się nad tym panować, każdemu daje szansę. Starym mistrzom z winylowych płyt i młodemu, który zbiera z majkiem pierwszy nawijania szczyt. Zongo zung, zugu zungu zęg. To krzak Yellowmana na głośniki dał. Za chwilę Diego do zagranego, przed chwilą rytmu się przymierzy. Na pełnej mocy będzie nawijał. Jeden woli roots, drugi woli dub, trzeci ragamuffin, a czwarty dancehall. Dla wszystkich sunboyów wystarczy tych fal. Jeden woli roots, drugi woli dub, trzeci ragamuffin, a czwarty dancehall. Dla wszystkich sunboyów wystarczy tych fal.
Oh no! The music's over before I'm ready. What up, ladies and gentlemen? How are you? This is not going to be a normal, boring, talking head stream where I just watch a video with my face on the screen for an hour and a half, 3 hours, telling you what's right and what's wrong. Oh no! We're going to do a thing that I've only done one other time, and that is we're going to try playing some video games while we do the rebuttal. And this is for several reasons, but let me get into it. Let me just get a little setup here. Got a few things left. We're going to keep that visible. 1 second. We're going to only show it when it's in view. There we go. All right. See, look, I have chat. What's up, everybody? I can see you on everything. All right. So let's get into some basic information here. Hopefully I can control this from VR. The first thing I want to point out is I want to talk about what we're about to do. We are about to go through a video that I've been asked by multiple of my viewers to review. Actually, this goes back even farther than that. For over a year, at least, maybe 2 years, maybe more, some of my viewers have asked me to do an analysis of Dave Smith's position on borders. And guys, this is not something I do very often, but so the tech might not be all lined up, but let me know how my audio levels are, voice level. I want to make sure you can hear everything. Give me feedback if I'm too loud or too quiet or whatever. Okay, so people have asked me for quite some time to do an analysis on Dave Smith's positions on this stuff. I'm happy to do it. It's going to be done in a respectful way, as always. I like Dave Smith. I agree with him on basically almost everything, except for some of the fundamentals behind natural law, Rothbardianism. Obviously, you know that background and that history. And then what I suspect, I think we're going to have some pretty strong and clear and hopefully easy to clear up disagreements on his position on the border, which stems quite a bit from Hoppe's work, Hoppianism, as it were. So I'm sure Dave's a great guy. Never met him in person. But it's time to go through it. So, as you can see, as with all of these sort of rebuttal videos that I do, I always prefer to invite them onto the show to talk through the stuff with me first, for many reasons. Many reasons I've talked about many times, right? It is always way more useful if you can go through why you think someone's wrong with that person there in front of you, to go through it with you, to tell you where you have a misunderstanding, things like that. I reached out to him. As you can see, I wanted to, because got doubters now, apparently. That's a thing that happens to me. People doubt that I actually reach out and give people a chance to come on. I absolutely do. I've waited a while, no response, which is fine. Look, and again, the other thing people assume is that I feel entitled to these people's time. I absolutely don't. Now, the second thing is, the second alternative is when somebody doesn't show up to defend their ideas, again, which is fine. I'm not entitled. The next best thing to do is to respect everybody's time, my time and all of your time. For me to spend time editing a video down, you know, like instead of going over this hour-and-a-half long video of Dave's, it would be wise for me to sort of distill that down into maybe a 30-minute video where we take the most important bits and we talk about those, and that's that. He took his video down that I was asked to analyze or provide an analysis on, right? So that leaves me in an interesting spot, right? So now I have to, if I clip the original video down, just like with what would have happened with, let's say, for example, Passio, I will be accused of taking things out of context and not really understanding his full position. And because I can't say, well, okay, just go watch his full video to get the full context. If I just do a reductive sort of talking head thing, which again I hate doing and I wish I didn't have to, then I mean it leaves us in a bad spot that I don't want to be in. So what we're gonna do is watch the whole thing, and that means we're gonna be here for a little while. And rather than just me doing the thing where I put my face on the screen for 2 hours, 3 hours, however long this takes, we're gonna try this thing that I've done before. Let's see. Hold on a second. And just for the record, I also asked him where I could find the full video of this. Luckily, somebody was able to send me a copy. So we actually have the video, though I have no idea why he's taken it down. He took it down on most all of his platforms. I don't really have an explanation. It's not really any of my business, I suppose. I'm definitely not entitled to answers in those regards. So let me just check on chat, make sure my audio is good. Video unavailable, image on screen. Yeah, that was the screenshot of Dave Smith's video that he made private. All right. You like the theme song? That's good. Okay. I have not seen most of this video. I've watched maybe the first 30 minutes just to get the gist of it, to see if I actually had a disagreement with him before I emailed him to offer him to, have a discussion on the topic. So I haven't seen this full video. I've also not seen the Spike Cohen debate. So a lot of this is going to be fresh and off the cuff for me. And let's get into it. Hopefully audio level's good. Here we go. Nice.
Good. Everyone. That's right. Just felt like because one that makes
One second, guys. I've got speakers on in my room, and that's echoing it for me. Be right back. Sorry about that. Let's get back on to here. Hopefully you guys like this format. I've done it only one other time when I was rebutting Yaron Brook's position on the existence of free will. I think we played a space sim game, No Man's Sky, when we did it. So let me know if you guys like this format. All right, 1 second. My bad here. There are so many moving parts behind what I'm doing right now. So, there we go. Can you guys hear the video? Let me know if you can't. Let me know. Can you guys hear the video? If not, I'll correct that. Uh-oh. All right. All right, 1 second. You know, you test everything beforehand.
Digital Network. Here's your host, Dave Smith.
All right, what's up, everybody? What's up? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein.
All right, how about now?
How you feeling this evening, my good friend?
I'm good. I'm ready for another battle royale. We're taking on everyone on the internet.
That's right. That's right. We got another response.
Let me know on the audio. You should be able to hear it now.
That I just felt like I had to do this episode on this topic. All right. So I for today's response is a one that makes me almost a little bit uncomfortable. Full disclosure. So I recently saw because I was several people sent me this tweet. And it was some other guy who I've had words with on Twitter before, not even important to mention. But he had tweeted these pictures of David Friedman writing about me, and so somewhat interestingly, I was also tagged the same day, or maybe the day before. I was also tagged in a Facebook.
A few technical difficulties here.
David Friedman went off on this whole thing about me. And anyway, if you don't know who David Friedman is, he's really a brilliant intellectual, anarchist, libertarian economist who's written some amazing, produced some amazing works. Somebody I very much admire. And there was a big split between Murray Rothbard, who is my, libertarian hero. Him and David Friedman had some strong disagreements, and I fall more on the Rothbardian side. But I always had a lot of respect for David Friedman. Still have. I don't mean to say that in the past tense. I have a lot of respect for David Friedman. I've benefited a lot from his work, and so this was a little bit strange to me to see him writing an article and then having this long Facebook post about me. I guess it's a little bit weird. No matter.
I think if Milty Jr. wants to throw up the Dukes, we'll have at it.
Well, yeah. So for people who don't,
I don't know who this other guy is.
David Friedman is the son of Milton Friedman.
I don't. I guess to be clear, and not meant as any kind of slight whatsoever, I don't actually watch Dave Smith's show. I've seen a couple of them, and what I have seen of Dave Smith, especially when he's making appearances on other larger shows, I typically really like what he has to say. But I don't know who this other guy is here with him.
Who's probably, I would say, probably the most famous free market advocate to ever live. I mean, like, in terms of fame, I think the most famous free market leaning economist ever. He was a Nobel Prize winning economist, but he also was just like very popular. Like, he wrote he wrote this book called Free to Choose that also had like a documentary companion to it, which, by the way, is really fantastic. Highly recommend it. He's also his appearances on like Donahue and all types of other like TV shows. He just did a great job really arguing for like the principles of a free society. Again, I fall more on
I agree. I like listening to Dave Friedman.
Than the Milton Friedman side.
Excuse me.
Somebody who I respect a lot. And David Friedman, I
respect him as well. Though
probably
the consequentialist stuff is quite cringe
to his father.
And I realize cringe is not a counter argument, so I will also say inconsistent.
You could argue the case, but he's anyway. I have a lot of respect for both of them. Now, I guess it's a little bit, no matter how much kind of like my audience grows, or the fact that my group of people kind of took over the Libertarian Party, and there's talks about me running and all of this stuff. I guess I still feel like the guy who just started, obsessively reading libertarian literature back in 2008 or whatever, and it's just like weird. There's something about it that's weird to see, like, wait, David Friedman wrote a piece about me? Like, I've never met him or interacted with him. I'm shocked I'm on his radar, although I guess it kind of makes sense, and he probably writes about a lot of different things. So anyway, so I saw a couple of the excerpts shared. Then I saw a couple people had tweeted the actual link to the article, and I read the article. So I figured, let's do an episode responding to it. It's about open borders and my position of rejecting open borders and trying to make a libertarian argument for rejecting open borders. I don't think open borders are the correct position. I don't think it actually makes sense.
I'd like to make my position clear, which is, yes, I don't mind open borders. I just don't like Mexicans. So, like, between us and Canada, or you want to import people from India, I'm okay with all of that. We just need a wall in the south.
That's Rob's position. Rob actually just supports a wall around Mexico.
I'm assuming this guy's there for the comedic relief.
And I'm not even making a joke. I just want to make it absolutely clear so that, everyone knows where we're at going into this.
I'm going to assume he's actually making a joke.
Position. Well, I will say, contrary to my hateful co-host here, I have really nothing but positive personal experiences with Mexican immigrants into the country, especially Mexican illegal immigrants, many of whom I worked with in shitty jobs that I had when I was a teenager, and who I really admired. But that's
there's some good ones. That's what Trump said. Yeah, there are some good ones, but
Trump said some of them, I'm sure, are fine people. Those were Trump's exact words. So anyway, this article, I guess he had watched. I did a debate with Spike Cohen on Lions of Liberty, moderated by Mark Claire a while ago. I don't even remember how long ago it was, but it's, I don't know, 6 months, a year ago. I don't remember exactly. But I think it's up there. You could probably go try to find it if you want to. So I guess he came across this recently, and he wrote like kind of a response piece to that, criticizing my position and Hans Hermann Hoppe's position, who he said that he thinks I have been influenced by, which is not incorrect.
Let me say one thing on this real quick. I am not privy to this back and forth with him and David Friedman. I'm using this video as maybe one of Dave's best expositions of his position on borders, because he's defending himself against somebody else's attacks. So the intent here is not to inject myself into this back and forth. The intent here is to talk to you guys. I don't care about the back and forth or whatever. My intent is to talk to you guys to clarify whether or not his position, I think his subtitle on his stream, though we can't see it big right now, is like the most consistent motherfucker, I think that's his subtitle. We're gonna be putting that to the test today, let's just say.
I have been influenced by Hans Hermann Hoppe, late Rothbard, Hans Hermann Hoppe, those guys, Lou Rockwell, all of those guys kind of convinced me. Yeah, there you go. So let me just try to preface this a little bit by laying out my case for how I feel about immigration at this point. I think I did a better job of doing or a fuller job than I will be able to here in that debate. But just to preface kind of this conversation with what my point was on this, and people who listen to the show, who have been listening to the show for a long time, you may know that they're, and if you don't, if you haven't been listening for a long time, you're a newer listener. If you want to go subscribe, go to gasdigitalnetwork.com, use the promo code POTP. That gives you access. It gives you a discount on the monthly price. You get grandfathered in at that price, and you get access to the entire history, the entire archive on demand of all the episodes. So over the years,
maybe that's why the video is
I
made
have
private.
Evolved my position on immigration.
See, that's why you don't assume.
Was once, I would have said, for open borders. When I first became a libertarian and then an anarcho-capitalist, that just seemed like the logical position to me. It seemed like I would just go like, well, look, what is immigration? That's just kind of like a statist concept. Like, and what is an immigrant? That's just something that the government calls them. Really, all you are is people.
Yes.
And what is a border? That's just an imaginary line. Like all immigration really is moving. And so who the hell is the government to tell one person they can't move to wherever they want to move? That was really like where I was at.
But then you found God and realized that you hate Mexicans. All right, last joke.
I found
I'm not sure
God,
about this guy. He doesn't seem to add much.
David, I need you to reconsider this open borders position. He goes, all of that Austrian economic stuff is pretty sound, but what are you doing, Dave? You don't have a border. You don't have a country. And I was like, really, God? You sound a lot like Trump. Anyway, but no, so what happened was, so I had read a bit of like the late Rothbard and Hans Hermann Hoppe stuff and kind of dismissed it initially. Like I was like, this seems kind of like a deviation from the pure libertarian stuff that I liked about them. And whatever, kind of went on. And I had read that stuff in like 2010, I think, or something like that, 2011, maybe around that time. And then around 2015, 2016, with the rise of Donald Trump and the populist right, this topic of immigration kind of came up again. It became the main thing. I didn't see that coming, that immigration was going to be the main, topic in a presidential election cycle. And I came in, I was arguing with a bunch of like right-wingers who were making arguments about why we shouldn't have open borders. And a lot of them made really stupid arguments. But some of them made some really solid ones. And then even like, there were just points that were made that I was like, shit, that there is something to that point. And I kind of did notice. And at the same time, there was this massive refugee crisis in Europe. And so this was just like a topic that was a very prominent hot topic. And I kind of went back and reread a lot of the Rothbard and Hoppe stuff. And I ultimately changed my mind. I was convinced by some of the arguments. I think I had kind of brushed some of them aside and not really considered them. And ultimately, this was a process where if you listen to the show, you could like hear me going through this, where I ultimately kind of really understood the point they were making. And basically, this is how I would lay it out. And this is how I laid it out in the Spike Cohen debate. I said that I think when it comes to, look, the libertarian theory on the issue of immigration is basically in the range. Libertarianism is basically a spectrum between minarchism and anarchism, between a very limited government and no government at all.
I disagree. The spectrum
for no government at all. If you're an anarchist,
this is really off topic, but I disagree. There is no spectrum. There is just inconsistent libertarians. So the more pro-government a libertarian is, I would call them a less consistent libertarian. But
co-capitalist.
And the reason why I mix the terms together is because, they literally mean the same thing. Like the principles at play are the same. The Libertarian Pledge speaks directly to the non-aggression principle, which, if held consistently, necessitates the anarchistic position. So any step you move away from that towards the end of politics or participation in government control is the degree to which you're less consistent libertarian. That's not really on topic, so let's continue.
You'd say that all property should be private property. Everything should be private. basically the anarcho-capitalist position.
Okay, I dislike and have long for years now advocated that people stop using the term private property. That is a commies term. And what I mean by that is there is no such thing as adjective property other than owned and unowned. Yeah, cigarette. There is owned property, there is unowned property. These other distinctions, private, personal, public, communal, commons, these are all stemming from this sort of communist ideology. And I really wish people would stop using the private one. It's just property. It's owned property and it's unowned property. More than that, I think you're confusing the issue and you're almost adopting some of the commie arguments in the process without realizing it. But anyway, again, off topic.
Is that the monopolies don't work well, and there's no reason to say we have to have a monopoly on laws and courts and police and military, but nothing else. It doesn't work well for anything else. We're basically saying you don't need to have a monopoly based on the monopoly of violence for anything. That's kind of, in a nutshell, the anarcho-capitalist position. And if that's the case, and you have private property and private communities and private blocks and even private cities or whatever, then immigration, you wouldn't have open borders, you would have private borders. And private communities could be as open or as closed as they choose to be. It's not like, oh, the position is that anyone should be allowed to move here. The position would be anyone who the property owners want to be allowed to move here should move here. Like it's a different thing than just government running the borders and maintaining them as open. And if you're a minarchist, basically the position is like, well, we don't really think the government should do anything except a few things. And if that's your case, well, I see no argument why in the few things couldn't also be maintaining borders. You know what I mean? Like as long as we're being inconsistent. So this is basically my point. Many libertarians, especially the ones who talk about open borders, when they talk about open borders, take it as what I referred to as an unexamined given, that government property ought to not have any restrictions on it. Okay, so the idea that it is, you'll hear libertarians who advocate for open borders often saying things that I used to once say, like, look, it's just a man or a woman or whatever walking over an arbitrary line. So what right does some man with a gun have to come and initiate violence on this person, like violently turn them away when they didn't do anything? They're just coming here for a better life. They're just coming over here. Like what is the problem with this? And I used to say that a lot too. But if you really examine that and you say, well, look, is it really a given that there can be no restrictions on government property? If you believe that, then take it to its logical conclusion.
Okay.
I mean,
whatever he's about to say after take it to its logical conclusion is going to be an argument from effect, consequentialist sort of justification. But just because most people don't examine things doesn't mean that those positions are invalid. In this case, let's examine it. If you have a person walking across unowned property, which I hold is equivalent to government property, public property. This is property that's either been, well, actually, it's not all unowned, but it's either been stolen, in which case it is owned, but the owner has been dispossessed, or it's unowned. It needs to be homesteaded. So if we're, you know what, I should stop playing the game while I'm making these explanations so that I can actually focus on them. How about we do that? Okay, so if you have a situation in which a person is crossing unowned property, Dave comes along and says, I object to this use of property. You would then need to arbitrate that, right? Okay, well, one of the first things that you need in any court case, common law or otherwise, is something called standing. You can't sue somebody that you have no association with, even one through damage. It would be like those people suing Alex Jones because he talked smack about somebody that wasn't them. They have no standing. They have no rightful case against Alex Jones, even if even if defamation was an actual rightful crime, which I disagree with in most cases. You have to have standing. And so if Dave Smith said, man, I really don't like how these people that I have nothing to do with and don't know are using this property that I have nothing to do with and don't own, so what? You don't have standing. And certainly, if you don't have standing to complain about them using property you don't own in a way you don't like, you certainly don't have the right to use force to control those people using that property that you don't own in a way that you don't like. Pretty basic argument. Let's see where he goes with his consequential justification. I'm sure it's going to be some using public property in a nasty way.
Imply that anybody can, these are examples I've used a bunch of times, but that anybody could walk into a public school anytime they wanted to. You know, if there's some 50-year-old heroin addict was like, I just want to walk into this public school and shoot up in the middle of the third grade classroom. You'd go,
yeah, see,
well,
nailed
what are
it.
you going to do? Are you going to forcefully kick him out? I mean, he didn't violate anyone. You know, he just crossed over an imaginary line into this building, and he's injecting heroin. I mean, it's his body, right? He has a right to do this. And I think even most libertarians would go, ugh. No.
I mean, he's saying this stuff in that voice. This is the Jon Stewart thing, you know, where Jon Stewart will say something in a silly voice that one would argue, and then pause for the audience to clap and laugh. And there's something about, and I was about to bring this up in a Jon Stewart rebuttal video on the "What is a Woman" thing that he's doing. I hear footsteps. Okay. I was about to bring this up in a rebuttal of his "What is a Woman" thing that Jon Stewart recently put out. His style of argumentation is literally doing what I just said. He'll play something that he disagrees with, or that he wants his audience to disagree with, and then he'll just smirk and pause, and then the laugh track plays. It's sort of like an argumentation through derision, which of course is not an argument, right? But it's effective. People when they perceive themselves to sort of be in a group of people or a crowd of people, and that whole group, you know, laughs or scoffs at an idea, it's a human flaw for the people to sort of just assume, ha, everyone's laughing at this guy, so he must be wrong. Not an argument. Oh, and what was he saying? So I must now necessarily, he's put me in this position, I must now necessarily defend the position of not being able to complain when so a homeless person goes into a public school and shoots up around all the kids. I'm supposed to defend that now. Let's let him finish and see where it goes.
No, I don't think that's okay. I don't think you're allowed to do that. You know, can you... and by the way, I have had libertarians argue with me that you should be allowed to do that. I think those people are insane, and it's just the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard in my life.
Okay, insane and ridiculous. Let me rebut insane and ridiculous as a proof that is a false position. Hold on, let me think. Oh, wait, I can't, because those are just name-calling. Those are not arguments that can be rebutted. It's his opinion that stuff is ridiculous. Hopefully he doesn't do this too much more after this, but ridiculous is not an argument that anyone can rebut, and it's also not a justification for any position. Hopefully there's some meat on this bone. Let me know if my mic's too hot, guys.
Not even really worth rebutting, because it's so absurd. But you know,
not even worth rebutting.
There's like
not even worth rebutting is not a rebuttal, clearly, right? And not trying to rebut something is, again, to kind of fall back on that sort of Jon Stewart, haha, let's just scoff this off and move on because we all agree, right?
State college. That.
So let me actually put in the work that he didn't, right? So a public school is either stolen or unowned property that Dave Smith doesn't have standing to have a say in the control over. You have a bunch of people that, for some stupid reason, choose to send their children to this piece of unowned property every day where there is no rightful owner that can justly enforce rules like safety and not doing heroin in front of children. They choose to send their kids to these places. Why? Wow. That is ridiculous. Don't send it. If you have kids, please get them the hell out of public schools. Please. Please. I think this quest is uncompletable. There are no monsters here to kill. I'm going to go here and see what this one is. Get an artifact. Okay, we can do that. So the answer again is, okay, Dave, you don't like people doing heroin in this property you don't own, where a bunch of other people retardedly send their children to 5 days a week. Who are you going to sue? Are you saying this justifies the use of force against the people peacefully doing heroin in the school? Oh, am I making that ridiculous argument now? Sorry, ridiculous is not a valid argument that anybody can use to justify something or to rebut something. So there's a person that's doing harm to himself, doing something really stupid that no one would want their children to be around if they were doing it. Where's your standing to use force against this person? Because you chose to send your kids to this public property? Sorry, that's on you. They chose to bring themselves to this public property and use it in a different way. How do you resolve who has a higher claim to the property? The person going to this unowned or stolen property to use it for heroin, and these other people that choose to use it to send their children to. How do you resolve that? It's unresolvable. Why? Because it's unowned property. Tragedy of the commons. There is no rightful owner that is exercising or exerting rightful control over the property. To assert that because people choose to send their kids to this place, therefore you get to assert, Dave Smith gets to assert property ownership, violent property ownership over this property, is not an argument. There is no justification being presented for that here. In fact, he just says it's not worth justifying the argument against what we're saying here. He's just not making an argument. So my position must stand as it goes unchallenged.
The valedictorian from high school should have no more right to it than somebody who dropped out in the 9th grade. Like, should we not give preference to any of them? If somebody wants to walk into a public library and start shouting
all right, so we're just going to get more of those. Argument. The school or park is not open to homesteading by anyone, as there is a prior claim by nearby taxpayers who are first users. It's not the problem with that argument is the taxpayer part. No one is a taxpayer. There are tax victims, people that are stolen from. When you have money stolen from you, you don't get to then decide that you get to communalize all of the money that was stolen and communalize all of the victims of that tax theft, and then decide for yourself that you're going to then exert ownership over wherever that money ended up getting transferred to. Because that whole process was full of coercion. Property title doesn't transfer when coercion is involved. You own the money that was stolen from you, full stop. Now, you can choose maybe to accept restitution from somebody in another form, but you can only do that for you. You can't communalize yourself in with all of the other victims and communalize all that money and decide that it's not only fungible as currency, but it's also fungible as any kind of property you so choose, and then exert ownership control over that. That's not valid. The most clear case is that you own the property that was stolen from you, because the title doesn't transfer because coercion was involved in that transaction. You still own that stolen money. Full stop. Now, if the stolen money was given to somebody else fraudulently to build a school, for example, you still own that money that's in possession of the school builders, and the school builders still have rightful possession of all of the materials that they used to build the school. Now, if it's unowned and not stolen, which it probably is if it's a public school, you could maybe make the case that it's been homesteaded by the people using it on a daily basis. That is like as a public easement, which, I mean, this is probably the strongest argument you could make for a public school. The same kind of argument strength that you could make for like airline. I need to go that way. for like airlines that fly the same path through the sky every day. There's a case that you could be made that, you know, these easements in the sky have been sort of homesteaded by those planes. In which case, you can't just leave it wishy-washy. You need to concretize this ownership and actually exert it. Give me a list of owners that are asserting first claim to it, and make sure that those first owners have the necessary provenance that they need to prove their first claim to ownership of that piece of property. You can't just say, oh, we all own it. This is a community random public thing. Otherwise, you're right back to where we are. If everyone owns something, that is equivalent to saying that no one owns something. And you're right back into the effective absence of property rights. If everyone owns something, then everyone has the right to do with that property what they want, including the homeless guy.
Obscenities. Should they not be allowed to ask them to leave? Like there's kind of I think you get to a point where most libertarians will realize that, yeah, it's ridiculous.
That's the second ridiculous.
Say there can be no restrictions on public property. It just.
I'm going to keep highlighting this if he keeps doing it. Saying something is just ridiculous is precisely saying nothing that we can apply to, nothing that we can. I can't even look. If I think he's right, I can't even accept his argument because it isn't one. I can't accept what he's saying as a position of mine because ridiculous as an adjective describing something is not a justification for me to hold a position.
We recognize that in all of these other areas, it would just lead to a disaster. Yet somehow we're supposed to accept that the border, which is completely owned by the government, must be completely open. That doesn't.
Okay, so he's moved on to a step 2. Because A is ridiculous, now we have this B position, which because A is ridiculous, B must also be ridiculous. But we haven't proven A, so B can't be proven either.
Make a lot of sense to me. And I think that you know, like from the libertarian perspective, you go, look, what's really going on when you have government property? Well, if we believe that taxation is theft and that the government is kind of illegitimate, and it's illegitimate that they expropriate from the taxpayer and then build these, you know, these commons or take over these areas which they call commons. Well, why is it? Like, it's very clear that we believe they shouldn't do that. But why is it so clear that we must believe after they do that, that they just have no standards for what they do with the government?
So it goes, just to answer his question that I already answered, and I don't want to keep repeating myself, so I'll probably just reference this again if he asks this type of question again. You have to have standing to justify using force against somebody in this situation. And you precisely don't have standing if you don't own something.
Property. So, for example, like to take, for example, in Gramercy Park, you know where that is, Rob, of course, in Manhattan. It's this it's I believe actually the most expensive little area of Manhattan. At least it used to be. I don't exactly know right now, but it's one of the most expensive areas in the world. It's this area that is all these like very private, beautiful doorman apartment buildings in New York City, and then there's a big park in the middle of it, and it's private. It's not a public park. And what they do is they have a huge gate and they lock it. And if you live in one of those buildings, you get like a key or the access code or whatever. But regular people can't come in there. And if there's like a random, like a loiterer or the trespasser, a homeless person, something like that in there, they are removed immediately. That's what keeps the property value up.
True.
Now, let's say tomorrow the government came in and seized that park and said, we are collectivizing this, we are making this a public park. And then they just let any homeless drug addict or anyone who wanted to come in there, right? You could say the government, yes, that must be the libertarian position, that they don't.
That's not well, I know he's not talking to me. He might be rebutting David Friedman, who might have actually held this, but the libertarian position is that land that was stolen by the government is still rightfully owned by the people that owned it before, the specific individuals that owned it before, and they still have the right to make the rules for it.
Maintain this in the same way that it was maintained when it was private.
This goes back to what I was saying about stolen property being communalized. Like, that's not how property transfer works. Just because the government steals something from somebody or a group of people doesn't then instantly make that property owned by everyone and democratically controlled by everyone. To do that, and let's just like steelman that for a moment. Let's say that we wanted to actually try and make a case in which that could be how it would function from a libertarian property ownership worldview. So let's say you have a local mafia, and they go down an entire street of, let's say, 10 businesses, and they rob all 10 businesses. And just to make things simple, they all rob all 10 businesses for the exact same amount of money. So all the damages amongst all the people are equal. Now, for one of those businesses, one of those robbery victims, to start attempting to get together with the other people and vote democratically to convince the mafia to use that stolen property how they want, would only function from a consensual libertarian position. Well, I guess I just kind of gave you the answer in that sentence, right? It would only work if it was consensual. And that means that all 10 of those victims would have to consent to collectivizing all of their property and then having that property owned and operated or controlled via a vote. If you don't get unanimous consent to that new sort of voting process, then you're just trying to convince the thief to use his stolen loot that you have no right to control in a way that you want, which is not libertarian. You don't have consent. And let's take it a step further. If you do go further and maybe even start successfully sort of convincing the cartel to use the stolen property how you want, especially in a way that benefits you, you're in danger. And I'm not saying this is how it always works or is always the case, but there are certainly cases I can imagine in which you become a co-conspirator in the theft crime. Like, if you convince the mafia to build a new business that somehow benefits you or pays you money or makes you sort of income, then a case could be made that, well, now you're just a co-conspirator with the mafia that is benefiting off of the non-consensually communalized stolen property. Hopefully I've made that case. I don't want to, if I start beating it into the ground, say something.
But even though we know when it's privatized, one of the benefits of it is that they're not going to let it fall to that, right? So, excuse me. I basically came to the conclusion that the standard can't be that on public property, it belongs to the world and there can be no restrictions. And I think a more reasonable standard is that it is, I'd say that libertarians don't have to believe that there are no restrictions on public property, and instead we can believe in reasonable restrictions on public property.
So this is the sort of there's a name for it. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But calling one thing reasonable and another thing unreasonable is, again, it's the same as calling something ridiculous. And I was hoping to get some stronger arguments here to digest. Hopefully those will be forthcoming. But saying that your idea or your opinion on how something should be used is the reasonable way of doing it matters precisely not at all when we're talking about consensual property usage.
Make life miserable for all of us while we still try to advocate toward limiting the size of the government and maybe even eliminating the government and all of that stuff. That's more or less the overview of what my position was. So is it anything you want to jump in on that, Rob, or what do you have to say?
The only thing I'd add is, government currently exists and we use it to police for murder. We use it to police for rape. And so if you don't like the activity of just people coming over the border, So it would make sense to also police for that activity. So now you gotta just question, well, do I want people to be policing the border? The answer is, if we didn't have social benefits, let as many people cross the border as they want. I like it. It means they show up here, they probably add value and services, they get to voluntarily exchange with other individuals. If they're an asset, they'll probably stick around because they'll get jobs, which means someone wants to employ them. And if there's no opportunities for here because no one wants to voluntarily exchange with them, they'll probably go back. It's a win. But guess what? If you're going to give them goods and services, then it's at a loss to all of us. It's theft. That's what it is. And then if their kids are going to be able to show up here and vote, it's also a theft because we didn't agree to that. You're now changing the rules of the system that they just get to show up, they get to have their kids, and then they just get to vote. So, like, I don't know. To me, the whole topic, it's nonsense talk. If you're going to let their kids vote, or you're going to allow them to have rights where maybe even they can vote, well, then we have to decide about whether or not we all agree that people should just be allowed to cross the wall and vote. And if we don't agree on that, then you got to put up a wall there, and you got to use the current system for...
I don't know who this guy is, but he's adding like negative amounts to the conversation. Like he's actively making arguments that are just assertions. So I'm going to move on and try and stick to Dave Smith unless you guys think something he said was cogent.
Policing this the same as rape and murder because it's not something that we want. So you build a wall and the government polices it. I don't understand the other perspective.
I'll say this, and this is a couple other points that I made, and just add this on, and then we'll get into this piece and respond to it. But I just want people to, because he's responding to what I said, so I want them to kind of have a little bit of the background in case people don't remember exactly, because we actually don't talk about immigration that much on the show. It's not like one of our major, themes. But I would say that I made the point that typically I don't make arguments about popularity in the country. Obviously, a lot of things that I believe are not overwhelmingly popular. But if what libertarians really believe when it comes to immigration, which really immigration wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the government, well, all that would exist was moving. You know what I mean? But if that's the case, then it would be up to the property owners, right, to decide who can and can't come in. And I'd make this point, I go, well, how popular is open borders? How many of the property owners in this country want open borders? And most polls that you can find on this, it's like, I don't know, in the neighborhood of 10%, maybe you could get of people who support this. Like the overwhelming majority, and I bet those 10% are disproportionately not property owners, but whatever. That's not, even really, most of them are fucking like liberal college kids or something. And how many of them are really taking on the responsibility themselves of, bearing the financial burden of this? I would guess not too many. I don't actually know. I'm speaking out of my ass a little bit on that, but that is my assumption. But regardless, it's like, yeah, okay, so if you have a population that doesn't want this, at least enough to the point that, like, say, Donald Trump runs on a platform of we're going to build a wall and wins the presidency. Okay, that's not the entire country, but he got like 63 million people to vote for him in 2016. You go, well, that's a whole lot of people who are saying, hey, we don't want this influx of immigration here. And, again, as I've said before, from a strictly libertarian perspective.
Okay, this is the worst form of the argument that I just destroyed. So this is saying that we have this communalized property, and all we need is 51% of the victims to be able to force the will of those 51% on the remaining 49%. This is everything wrong with democracy that libertarians spend a great deal of their time arguing against and rightfully and astutely rebutting.
It's like, look, if you invite, let's say you have some property and you have whatever, you have some property and you invite a friend of yours from Mexico to come move onto your property, and a government official or government agent stops them, says, no, you're not allowed to go there. From the libertarian position, that is absolutely a violation of your rights and that person's rights. It's unacceptable from a libertarian point of view. However, when you just have, say, like,
we're gonna have a gunfight and then trying to pay attention to what he's got to say. I hear a lot of people now. Scared a little bit of pee out. Don't worry about that. Whew. Whew. All right. Let's get the hell out of here. Shouldn't have stayed out so late. Oh! This is not good. Woo! Okay, let's just go. All right, the stream was not supposed to get this exciting. Let's just kind of run over here. See if we can sort of regroup. Y'all know you were going to get... I hear something coming now. Okay. Sorry.
A caravan of 100,000 people walking over here who nobody invited. Nobody said, oh, yes, we'd like you to come here. I don't understand how any libertarian deduces the right to enter onto property that does not belong to you. Like, where does that come from?
Okay. You don't need a right to enter something that is not owned by anyone. If that were the case, then it would be impossible to homestead anything, because you wouldn't be able to enter unowned property.
What right do you have? Like, if 5 homeless people just show up at my door and they're like, we'd like to come into your house, and I'm like, no, sorry, like, you can't come in. What right do they have to come here? Like, they don't. And now I understand the country is not my house. I get that.
You can't be just, yeah, okay.
Have these like fucking midwit responses. But like, okay. I'm just saying, if we're talking about the public property, okay, maybe it's not exactly any one American.
To be fair, he just made a midwit ass argument and then tried to preemptively make fun of anybody that were going to call him on it. So,
but doesn't it belong to them a little bit more than it belongs to the people who were never robbed to pay for it? Shouldn't we care more? Since there's no libertarian solution here, like, obviously, ideally, it would all be privatized, but it's not. And so right now, if I have to pick between these two...
So he just said there's no libertarian solution and then named it. So obviously the libertarian solution is to stop communalizing property and have an owner.
Options? I'd rather not have what the vast majority of the American people who own property and paid for all this stuff want. Okay, so that's where I'll start, and let's get into the David Friedman piece here. Okay, it's titled. It was written on June 26th, so I guess this was last month. He wrote this, although I just found it the other day. But he wrote "Open Borders: The Libertarian Argument." So David Friedman writes, "The traditional libertarian position, the position I argued for in my first book, is support for open borders. That was also the traditional American policy. For the first century of the country's history, anyone who could get here was welcome to come. Limits on Chinese immigration were imposed in the late 19th century, but broader restrictions only came in the 1920s and did not at the time apply to immigrants from other parts of the New World. Murray Rothbard switched his position from opposing restrictions on immigration to supporting them as part of his adoption of a paleo-libertarian strategy of alliance with the right, followed by Hans Hermann Hoppe and others. In trying to understand their arguments, I have used 2 sources, an article by Hoppe and a web debate between Dave Smith and a prominent figure in the Libertarian Party and the Mises Caucus that currently controls it, and Spike Cohen, the most recent vice presidential nominee of the LP. Cohen supported open borders, Smith opposed them, using arguments largely...
Maybe I need to go watch this debate. Maybe I should be rebutting this debate.
And you got some sexy-ass credentials now.
Yeah, I guess I don't... Yeah, it's not bad. I guess I'm fine with...
I appreciate his humility. I feel that.
You know, arguing that... I mean, look, he's not like really building an argument off this. He just stated kind of as a matter of fact that originally America didn't have immigration restrictions. You know, obviously it's a very different thing, a very different time. And just,
yeah, we also didn't have free everything in socialism.
Right. There was none of this, right? And also, I'm not at all saying I support this. So let me just be clear and disclaim this. But it was also a time when, I don't know, there was probably some pretty strong prejudices against other cultures. I don't know. I just don't think
Yeah, imagine being a black guy and just taking a boat here.
Yeah, right. I don't think that if 100,000 Spanish-speaking brown people just came into the country back then, everyone would have been like, well, I mean, we don't have any immigration restrictions.
Didn't they throw potatoes at the Irish?
Yeah,
I saw gangs in New York.
Yeah, it's a little goofy to kind of even compare this to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, there was no formal policy, but they would yell at you when you came off the boat.
Right. Again, not saying any of that's good, just saying you're the one who brought it up. Let's, get into it. And to say that my arguments are largely borrowed from Hoppe, I mean, it's, yeah, Rothbard, Hoppe, and Lou Rockwell. I'll certainly grant that. I'm not running away from where these arguments come from, and I think they all make really good points. All right. The argument against open borders follows three related lines. The first starts with the idea that in the ideal libertarian society, all property would be private, and an individual firm or voluntary community would be free to exclude or admit anyone. Since what we actually have is a society in which much property belongs to the government, the nearest we can come to that is having the government control who can come. All right. See, I don't exactly agree with that statement, because the point that we're trying to make, and this is splitting hairs a little bit, but the point we're trying to make is that open borders is still the government deciding who can come. That's kind of the point, that they're deciding anyone. But deciding anyone isn't not deciding who. It's not like if it's limited, if the government decides no one can come, the government's deciding who can come. And if the government decides some people can come, the government's deciding who can come. And if the government decides anyone can come, the government's deciding who can come.
Wow. Okay, so if I stood outside your house, just outside your property, let's say, in the path that people use to typically enter your property to walk up to your front door and knock on it. And when they walked up, I said, hey, you have permission to walk up to this house. You would be like, I knew I had that permission, and I wasn't asking you, and I don't really care whether or not you consent. It's certainly not an aggression for me to stand out there. What the hell was that sound? Certainly not an aggression of some kind for me to... I don't know if you guys can hear that, but weird sounds going on. Yeah, it's certainly not an aggression or anything bad for me to do that. And to say that me standing outside your house and telling people they had my permission, which is meaningless in that situation, to enter the property, to say that doing that is equivalent to me standing outside your property and telling people they cannot enter your property is, what was the word? Ridiculous. It's obviously not valid, right? They're not equivalent. Me using force to disallow somebody from entering your property is an aggression on your property, because I'm asserting an ownership claim over your property by controlling how you use it. Me standing outside your property and precisely not doing that by telling people that they have my personal immaterial opinion that they can enter your property is not an aggression, because I'm not interfering in your use of your property. This is a wild argument.
So it's not as if only the people who restrictions are deciding that.
All right, let me just catch up on, make sure I haven't missed any. You guys are gonna have to help me maybe a little bit with some of these comments. If you have a question or a challenge specifically for me to read to make sure I don't miss it, maybe put it in all caps or something, and I'll try and catch those. But yeah, we're gonna do the best we can on this. Open border still acknowledges a border, is what he's saying. Yeah, but what he's saying is that acknowledging a border is like if you won the case and told the government to quote unquote open their border, that would be equivalent to a guy standing outside and doing nonsense like telling people they had the permission to go in.
You know what I mean? I know Rob wants.
Hopefully, I made that clear, and if not, let me know in the chat.
All over your face, but you get my point, right? It's still, as long as the government controls the borders, then the government's the one making the decisions, and we may not like that. It's just that is the reality. This is something libertarians have trouble with, and it really bugs me because I don't understand why. And most of the
well, your Dave's position here is invalid, and I hopefully described why that's the case. I can, well, I'm not going to repeat myself. Hopefully you got it. And if you didn't, you can let me know.
Libertarians don't have an issue with this. But like, man, for people who understand this beautiful fucking philosophy and like spend all of their time on this high theory, let me break this down for you. A can be your ideal, and you still think.
Is he going to take a shot at purists?
B is preferable to C. Okay? Saying B is preferable to C, like a response to that isn't like, well, it's not A. It's like, yes, I know. We'd all prefer that. All right, anyway.
Hold on. Okay, so earlier somebody was asking about there's like a line down the left side of the screen. That's because the computer, when you're doing VR, renders two eyes. And so what you're seeing on most of the right side of the screen is my right eye's render. And then just to give you guys a little bit more context, I added a little bit of the left eye. And there's the mix between the two changes based on how far away the thing is from my face. So if it's really up close, you're going to see that line really obviously because I set it to sort of mix properly, like 20 feet out away from me. Anyway, random VR knowledge. What was he saying? Oh yeah. So there's a difference between preference and how something is. I'm not contesting that. I would not contest that. You can have a preference all day long. In fact, I haven't, I'll give it more thought later. So consider this a tentative statement. But if I had a preference, it would certainly be to end the welfare state before a bunch of people come in here and get on welfare to take more stolen property. Which would potentially give the politicians justification to increase their theft crime. That would be my preference. Does my preference justify me advocating for additional or any at all initiation of force on the border? Absolutely not. My personal preferences don't justify force against people that aren't aggressing against me or my property. So we can both acknowledge that preferences exist and also remember the implications of our principles. And so if this is a distinction that I'm missing from Dave, and his position is that the government should absolutely not use force on anybody at the border, and he's just expressing his preference about the order in which, he would personally hope that it happens, then we don't have an argument. But if he's advocating that force at the border continue until his preference, blah, 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 then we have a conflict with principle, and now you're no longer consistent with libertarian principle. Hopefully I'm being clear. How do you guys like this format? Is this more entertaining or worse? You wish I would just drop this stuff and do the dumb talking head? Let me know.
So, since Smith argues a considerable majority of the population opposes open borders, the government should restrict immigration on their behalf. Again, that's not exactly my argument. And it's a really, I think, disingenuous way to present it. But, I think that I'm sure a considerable majority of people are for making heroin illegal. But I still don't believe heroin should be illegal. There's still lots of things that I don't support. I don't just support it. I'm supporting it because in a libertarian society, it would be the property owners who get to make this decision. And the vast majority of the property owners are clearly telling you they would make a different decision.
No, it is not analogous. Here's the difference. In a free society, the relatively small number of property owners that encircle this particular, let's say, continent or North America, whatever, or America, would not justly have the right to make decisions on who could and couldn't enter other people's property inside. And for this, you can go look at my search my channel for the donut homesteading problem. They would necessarily have to allow an easement to get to the property inside of their property. So it is not an equivalent. And you can't say just because he thinks most people, and again, that's a massive assumption that his poll is accurate, but even if it was, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Even if 100% of the border property owning people didn't want people crossing, I don't know, their property, they would not have the right to imprison the property owners inside or to control how the property owners inside of that donut used their property. Again, I did a whole video on this. Look up the donut homesteading problem.
That's something different, right? We can get into this a little bit more, but it's not just that I'm saying a majority of people are against this, and that's why I oppose it. Okay. The problem with that argument is that with no restrictions on immigrations, individual employees are still free to employ or not employ immigrants. Individual property owners to sell or not to sell to them. Landlords to rent to them or not to rent to them. In the society as it now exists, transactions between current Americans and new immigrants are voluntary, just as they would be in a fully libertarian society. Okay, that is straight up not true. Like, I'm sorry, he just said in the society as it currently exists. That is not true. Let me go through this one more time, okay? The problem with that argument is that with no restrictions on immigrations, individual employers are still free to employ or not employ immigrants. False, not true. You cannot not employ someone because they're an immigrant. You cannot not give someone, you are not free to, you do not have the freedom to not hire someone because of their country of origin. That is absolutely not true. Yeah, right. Well, that's for sure. If they're here legally, you absolutely don't have the right to it. That would be discrimination under the law, and that's illegal. That's like a protected class. You cannot, believe me, the lawsuit that you would fucking be looking at if you ever just said, I just don't like Mexicans, and so I'm not going to hire this guy. Now, again, I'm not saying I support someone doing that, but if you're making the argument that they're still free to not hire to them, no, I'm sorry. That is not true. Individual employers are still free to employ or not employ immigrants. Not true. Individual property owners to sell or not to sell to them. Not true. I mean, come on. Landlords to rent or not to rent to them? Landlords don't have the ability to not rent to someone based on the fucking, like, where they're from. This would be a humongous lawsuit. In today's America. So that's true. Absolutely not true. You do not have the right to discriminate in America in 2022.
That's true.
Just like a factual error in the society as it now exists. Transactions between current Americans and new immigrants are voluntary, just as they would be in a fully libertarian society. I don't know what to say about this, but like, no, you have. One of the major reasons, right, why people have problems with this is that you'll have communities where people have been paying, let's say, like public schools, for an example, right, where people have usually property taxes are what pay for the public schools. Now, not all public schools are 100%, supported by property taxes, and there is some federal money that goes to them and stuff. So there's other taxes that go to them. But like, you have a community of people who have been paying property taxes for 20 years, and they've been paying money to this school the whole time. Being stolen from for 20 years. All of a sudden, very quickly, especially in some of these border towns, the demographics are drastically changing. And now all of a sudden, a whole bunch of the kids who go there, English, they don't even speak English, or English is their second language or something like that. And I don't know. Now, I know this comes off fucked up to a lot of people. And they'll be like, oh, you're being prejudiced, or you're standing up for the right of people to discriminate. And like, yes, I am. I believe in people's rights to discriminate. I'm not saying that like it's always a great thing to do. In some situations, it makes a lot of sense, and some it doesn't. But this is one of the things that like having kids kind of like opens. It changes your perspective on some of this stuff. If you are sending your kids to a public school and you've been paying for this, not by choice, but being forced to pay for this for a long time, and all of a sudden, a huge percentage of the kids going to your kids' school were raised in a third world country with a very different, much more violent culture than we're used to, and don't speak the language. That might be something you don't support. You don't really support your kids being in school with those kids. And that is not voluntary.
So stop sending your kids to that.
Oh, if they come here, then well, that's voluntary. Well, no, those other people who were forced to pay for the schools have no say. They have no say in what these in who is admitted to that public school. And by the way, the public school has no say. They have absolutely no say in this. If you're in their district, they have to accept you. So it's just not true that, oh, this is, as long as you have open borders, then every other interaction is basically the same as it would be in a libertarian society. It's not true, factually speaking.
Who makes that argument?
No, I don't
was
know
that
exactly
Friedman making that argument?
In New York City, it was over it's over $20,000 per student per year that the public schools get in money. 20 grand per student per year. So you come in with 3 kids, that's 60 grand a year in tax money. Is that voluntary? Is that voluntary that all of the people who have been putting this money in is now just gets to be extracted by someone who just got here, who hasn't been contributing to this pool? Doesn't seem fair to me. And this is for whether they
it's not fair.
Legally or illegally.
So let's get something straight. Theft is not fair. Coercion is not fair. Violence is not fair. When a cartel comes in and hurts and steals and robs, nothing that comes from that is going to be fair. A cartel doing bad things to you does not justify you creating more victims of other peaceful people. Let's just be clear with that argument up front.
That's just, again, to say this is all voluntary is just not true. All right. Government restrictions on immigrations do what private restrictions in a stateless society could not do: prevent other people from interacting with immigrants. Well, that is a true statement. That is a true statement, that government restrictions do what private restrictions could not do. Absolutely, completely agreed. But government opening into a state of society also does what private opening could not do, right? That's the point. That also, like, if you were in a private school, in a private community, and the private owners decided to open this, the private customers could choose to pull their money out. So it also wouldn't be forced on them the same way. So this is like what he's just not getting. Yes, no one's arguing that obviously government restrictions, if anything, are not the perfect libertarian answer. The point is that government compelled opening of society is also not what any private actor could do. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's not a justification for aggressing on innocent, peaceful people.
So,
it's just more of the cartel doing more bad things. It's the cartel creating more victims.
Some of the interactions with immigrants will be involuntary. Immigrants will collect welfare payments and send their children to public schools paid for by the taxpayer. Anti-discrimination law might force employers to hire immigrants, landlords to rent to them, even if they did not want to. Immigrant voters, if there were enough of them, could vote to tax other people and spend money on themselves. So I don't understand exactly, because he just said in the previous paragraph that, and let me quote this, in the society as it now exists, transactions between current Americans and new immigrants are voluntary. And then in this next paragraph lays out why they are not. So let's keep reading. Open borders do not imply instant citizenship. While there were no restrictions on immigrations in the early history of the U.S., there were restrictions on naturalization. Such restrictions could be retained in an open borders system. Libertarian theory does not imply that everyone who comes can vote. Citizenship is not a protected category under current non-discrimination law, so those laws would not prevent employers or landlords who wanted to refuse transactions with some or all immigrants from doing so. Pretty sure nationality is, and I think that would be. I just don't think it's. I think that any landlord or business who just said we're not going to hire immigrants, like you might say about illegal immigrants, I suppose, but you're not talking about illegal. You may say they're not citizens, but as soon as you're saying open borders, then there's nothing illegal about them, and I just don't think this is correct. I don't think it's correct that you could just discriminate against someone because they're from some other, because then it's nationality, which is protected. Even though the term immigrant.
I guess I'm not part of this part of the discussion, so I'm good. Just playing on ahead. Let me know if you guys think I need to address something.
Also, even with the, I guess I can volunteer to work with this individual. It still could be like, yeah, it's great. I get to work with this guy, and he's willing to work for a lot cheaper. But my working with him also affords his ability to live here, which then creates socialized costs for everyone else who's then going to have to pay for their health care, have to pay for their kids, or any the fact that they're not, maybe they're sending more emissions, more of it's off the books. So it's not just a clear-cut voluntary decision between two individuals.
Right. That's exactly right. So if you go, okay, like in today's system where he's saying this, if you go, oh, well, I'm hiring this illegal immigrant because I can pay him way less than I pay these other guys. It's like, okay. And then he sends his kids to public school and he goes to the emergency room with his whole family whenever they're sick. And all of this is passed on to the taxpayer. It's like, okay, but why shouldn't the taxpayer then get some say over this? Like, why doesn't he? Why is that violation of that person's rights not considered at all in this? And I know libertarians can say, yeah, but it's not actually the immigrant who's violating his rights; it's the government. Okay, agreed.
Okay, I want to let him finish his point, but a rebuttal that he's missing here is that you can't collectivize everybody coming across the border. Certainly, there's a whole lot of people that cross the border that don't send their kids to public school, that don't sort of voluntarily get on welfare, things like that. Those people, and listen, like, I know we're talking about a large border and a large number of people, but morally, it takes one. It takes one innocent, peaceful person crossing the border with no intent and no consent to aggressing on you or accepting stolen resources. All it takes is one of those for your position supporting government forcible, non-consensual control of the border to be invalidated from a libertarian perspective. All it takes is one. Because, and here's why, the government doesn't have a lever to pull to allow people that fit that libertarian compatible criteria through and then only aggress against and only impede the rest of them. That lever doesn't exist. That mechanism doesn't exist. You make a law closing the border or even regulating the border such that the government forcibly detains everyone as they go through to check their credentials even, and you're going to catch the innocents. The people that you have no right to control, the people that are not going to be co-conspirators in the tax theft crime from you. That doesn't work. That runs immediately afoul. All it takes is one. That's how morality, that's how moral philosophy functions at the individual level. You can't collectivize everybody coming across the border and say, well, even, 98% of them are going to come across and aggress, therefore aggression is supported. No. Doesn't work like that.
The ideal solution is that the government doesn't do that. That's better. However, right? A is the ideal. Then you have B and C. Which one is preferable over B and C? Why is it so clear that it's preferable that that guy gets screwed and it's just like, yep, taxpayer has to pay for your healthcare, your education, your roads, like all of these things. Why is that so clearly preferable to No, he doesn't. He doesn't have to pay for all.
It's not more or less preferable. This is not a spectrum. It's black or white. Either people coming across the border are going to aggress, and you might be able to make a one-off case that they could be forcibly prevented. No, it's black or white. It's well, I'm repeating myself, so let's continue.
That's where the argument comes in.
Also, just to state a little bit differently, it's like when government enacts laws, then there's like other things that have to come with it. So if they say, hey, we're going to have socialized benefits here, well, then you're going to have at least walls. I mean, is that going to be for the entire global population? I mean, if you're going to focus
this is bare assertion, man.
Things
again
for the American citizens,
the quality of this discussion goes down every time he talks. It seems like I don't know this guy. Maybe he's cool, so
and not just let anyone make use of that.
He's just not good at this.
Or if you're telling me that you're not allowed to discriminate against American citizens, well, then you're going to need a category of, well, then is there another category of person that's not American citizen that I can discriminate against?
Right.
And so if you're telling me that I'm both not allowed to have voluntary association and there's going to be forced wealth redistribution, so then there can't be just an open border. You got to kind of pick what you want. I'd rather, hey, let's not have the socialized benefits and let's have an open border. That works better for me. But if you make the socialized benefit decision, then the immediate counter decision you have to make is, well, then we can't have the open border thing. It's one or the other.
It's one or the other, says you, and your preferences don't dictate what is right or wrong. You don't get to preference your way into controlling people at the point of a gun.
Like privatized all of the hospitals and abolished all of the kind of like laws and regulations around that, and abolished fucking public schools, and abolished like all this and that, and abolished anti-discrimination laws and all of this. Like, okay, fine, I'm not arguing with you anymore about immigration. But that's pretty goddamn far off from where we are. So dealing with the real world is a little bit different than that. Okay.
This real world bullshit again. Haven't heard that since
so far as the
Pete
public schools are
Quinones.
concerned, libertarians, at least the same ones who argue for immigration restrictions, support decentralization. A legal regime with open borders could give every school district the option of serving or not serving non-citizen immigrants. Yeah, okay, right. They could, I suppose. Again, justice suggests that if a school district rejects the children of non-citizens, the taxes that fund the schools, including property taxes on property they occupy, should not be owed to the parents or the landlords. That would come as close to mimicking what would happen in a stateless society where all schools were private, as is practical in the existing system. So, yeah, again, it's kind of like to go, look, you could have open borders and ensure that every, non-citizen doesn't get welfare, and ensure...
Guys, I think I just got a real gun. Oh, I'm so excited. Oh, I've been waiting for a real gun this whole time. Like a real long gun, I mean. Hold on, this is important. Sorry.
That every non-citizen doesn't vote, and ensure that every non-citizen isn't able to go to public school, and ensure that every non-citizen can be discriminated against, and ensure that, like, okay, that to me seems way more far-fetched than just saying okay, how about this? Until we fucking get those reforms you're talking about.
I feel like I've already made my proper rebuttal case, and so I'm just going to spend a lot of time listening to him argue with David about other things.
I'd like to see those reforms.
Yes, you guys can let me know if you want me to continue the stream.
I don't disagree with that.
We'll go a little bit longer and just see.
Why is it that libertarians must advocate for open borders under current situations? Why is it then, if you have to kind of do all these mental gymnastics, not mental gymnastics, I shouldn't even say that. If you have to say that in theory it's possible for X, Y, Z, and then A would work, why can't I go, okay, I'm not advocating for A until you've achieved X, Y, Z?
But you know what's so dumb about this? Things are out of sight, out of mind. Let's be honest. If people living in another country, I don't see the news footage of them. I don't know what their lifestyle looks like. You bring all those people from South America here. You say there's going to be a legal open border, but we don't have to educate them. If all of a sudden there were 1,000 kids, literally 6-year-olds, living on the street of my town, you don't think everyone's going to go, all right, they're here, we have to figure out how to help them out?
Of course.
Now, am I saying that it's nicer to put up a wall and tell them that they just can't come here so that I don't have to confront them? No, it's not more moral, but I'm just saying it's more practical. Like, if they're coming in here, we're going to have to help them out. And with what resources? Like, I don't know. There's just something
if they're coming here,
stupid about
we're going to have to help them out.
I like it.
Who is this guy? Hold on.
Have open borders, then you force countries.
Is this guy on Dave's stream often? He just says the stuff. Those were definitely words.
You know, Mexico at some point would have to change what they're doing to kind of retain some of their citizens. I think it's good. I think it's good for humanity. Have open borders, let people go where there's opportunity for them. I think they'd have a good natural flow, would be all good. But without the other freedoms, I don't know. It's like building more floors without a foundation. It makes no sense. Like, you don't have what could make it work. So you're just going to flood more people in. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of like kind of living in theory.
Oh, it's his co-host, so he's on there often.
World. And,
wow,
and
that's
going
not
like again, like I said before. Okay,
ideal.
I'm not saying it's theoretically impossible to come up with all of these situations, but what this ends up translating to is libertarians going, you have to advocate for open borders right now. And in the actual existing world, right? Not in the theory, in the actual existing world, illegal immigrants are voting. Now, what the numbers are on that exactly is unclear. Nobody exactly knows where.
Okay, in the real world, and I love using this distinction, it's like anytime you hear somebody talk about the real world, they're making excuses to suspend libertarian principle. But in the real world, right now, the libertarian position that you must advocate for, and I'm making this as a blanket statement, is that it is always immoral to initiate the use of force on a peaceful person. Always and forever. It doesn't matter what magic, real world, modern, current day, now in the real world time it is, or if we're living in Ancapistan in our head 100 years from now. It doesn't matter. The libertarian position that you must support and that you must advocate for is that you may not initiate the use of force on peaceful people. That includes all of these stupid discussions that we're having here today. Full stop. Okay. Glad we got that said, out there.
There's been actual audits of this. It's been shockingly higher than most people think. The reality is that illegal immigrants, as well as legal immigrants, are receiving welfare. They are using
the libertarian position is not you may advocate for some force because you personally feel that a different kind of force is worse.
There isn't like freedom of association and all of it. Like,
not a nap I've ever heard of
that we live in. Okay. And then I guess
how many are currently. I mean, how many people? Brian, maybe you can look up the number, but how many people are coming in monthly?
Do you like the hands in the game? Because I'm explaining.
You don't even know. Let me tell you. Let me tell you right now. We don't know how many people are coming in monthly.
But I'm just saying.
We know how many.
Since Biden, I would estimate.
Let me just make this clear. We don't know how many people are coming in monthly. We know how many border apprehensions there are monthly. For a while there, it was in the hundreds of thousands. And yet they still say, oh, there's 12 million illegal immigrants, the same number they've been using for fucking like 20 years.
Can you know?
Which is bullshit. They don't know it all. They don't know. There's been, you go read, there's been a lot written on this, but there's been different like estimates that range between 12 million and 50 million. No one exactly knows. Is it really crazy?
Is that annual or?
No. Total illegal immigrants. Like people don't know. It's somewhere in that ballpark. And it's crazy that in a country of 330 million people to not even know. We don't even know. And like, again, I don't even care. I don't care about knowing if it wasn't for all of these other statist issues. That's really the fucking problem.
Well, it's bullshit that they don't know because they know every single time I'm 5 miles over the speed limit in front of a school. They know every single time I go into New York and I come back from Connecticut. They knew every single person that was inside of a building. The idea that the government doesn't know how many non-American phones are near the border on a daily basis it's just not true. But to speak to my other point, go with a very conservative number. Let's say there's 1 million people coming in illegally every year. Let's just throw that out there. and let's say each of these people only has one kid. I don't know if you're talking about in 20 years from now that no Republican ever gets elected. Like, you know what I mean? You're not really, especially.
Well, I don't even know. Let me tell you something. The interesting dynamic there is actually that the fucking Latino vote has been growing for Republicans. So I don't know if that's necessarily a foregone conclusion, but it's still enough. It's still reason enough for somebody to go like, who actually gets the say on that? Why is it a given?
The person that owns the property.
Should just be like, well, we just have to accept that that's what's going to happen, and however it goes, it goes. I mean, look, none of this is correct. This is the problem, right? From libertarians have to understand. Once you have government intervention into any of these areas, none of this is a libertarian solution. And so again, like, look, if you have
the argument, I'm going to stop repeating myself. You guys just tell me to shut up if I'm repeating myself. The argument I get repeatedly from people like Pete Quinones and now what I'm hearing from Dave is that because none of the options right now are compatible with libertarian principle, it's still okay to pick one of these anti-libertarian options. No, not if you want to be what was his title on the screen? The most consistent libertarian you've ever met, or something like that. This is easy. This is math. This is like basic
government
101.
Property where there are
it's inconvenient,
sure,
people sucks
camped out and just living there. That is not a libertarian solution. It is not libertarian at all to say that, like, okay, if I live on like a nice block, like I used to, on the Upper West Side, if I live in like a real nice block with, people who fucking, everybody on that block who has apartments in that block, everybody goes to work, makes a good fucking living, everybody works hard, everybody pays taxes and all of that. The government steals this money from you, and then they build fucking this sidewalk with it. And then some homeless guy decides he's not paying anything, he's going to sit there and just fucking camp out. And the government doesn't remove him. That's not a libertarian solution. It's like, man, if this was private and we all owned this, we would have that guy removed. Now, if the government does remove him, that's also
correct.
Not a libertarian
You can't
solution.
control property you don't own. I'm repeating myself, so I'm not even going to pause it.
The libertarian solution is for it to actually be privatized. But if there's two non-libertarian solutions, I pick the solution where my daughter doesn't walk by some human being fucking shooting up heroin on the street.
Well, that is your responsibility to protect her.
Out of two non-libertarian solutions, I pick the one that I think is better than the other one. I don't.
Sorry, as a libertarian, you don't get to pick the option that involves violently coercing somebody that isn't attacking you or your property.
There's socialism, and we've got all these social benefits that we cannot afford: healthcare, social security. Go down the list. We're running a giant deficit. We can't afford any of this.
We're not running a deficit. Who is this guy?
You got a forest fire here of something that we cannot sustain, and you're like, well, let's have.
We are not running a deficit. The country, the people running the country, have ran up massive debt that none of us are responsible for. Why? Because we didn't consent to it. Sorry, I'm gonna stop.
Costs. Or you want another example? We got a sinking boat. There's a hole in it, and someone wants to bring a hose on with more water coming on. It's not going to work. We literally can't afford what we're currently doing, and now you want more people that are going to cost us more money? How does that work?
Yep. There you go. All right. So back to the article. Hoppe's proposal along these lines was that any immigrant should be allowed in if a citizen is willing to sponsor him, where the sponsor would then be responsible for any costs the immigrant imposed on others, paying fines for any crimes he committed, damage payments for any torts, presumably also paying the cost of sending the immigrant's children to a public school. The argument, presumably, is that the sponsor, by letting the immigrant in, is an indirect cause of all such costs. Okay, so look, what Hoppe's saying here is not presuming that he's the cause of all such costs.
I disagree with Hoppe on this stuff too, by the way.
Saying. What Hoppe's saying
is
a
separate video, probably.
Is there will be these costs. It's a very important distinction. So he says that Hoppe's proposal, basically, which I kind of think that short of anarcho-capitalism is the best libertarian simulation you could have, is that anyone can come who is invited and sponsored by a citizen. that should be our immigration policy under a status paradigm. So basically you can invite anyone you want to, but you got to basically vouch for them. So like if that person ends up being a criminal, you're on the hook for their costs. If that person goes on welfare, you're on the hook for those costs. If that person goes whatever, you know, like you're on the hook. And then what Friedman here says is that presumably the argument presumably is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, because Hoppa's never said this. The argument presumably is that the sponsor, by letting the immigrant in, is an indirect cause of all such costs. It's not saying that the immigrant is the cause of these costs. We all recognize that the government is the cause of these costs. What Hoppa is recognizing, not assuming, just recognizing, is that these costs will be imposed on someone else. And so why should they be imposed on the person who's not making the choice? Shouldn't they be imposed? If you're really choosing, look, if you're inviting someone in, but then the costs are imposed on someone else, then your invitation means nothing. I want to hear from the person who the costs are imposed on, right? So if you're going to invite them in and it actually is meaningful, then you'd have to invite them in and say, no, I'm inviting them and I'll assume the costs. Now, what this would automatically do is create an incentive for people to only invite in people who they were somewhat upstanding, who they could trust to some degree, who they were willing to, like, okay, I'll put my neck out for this guy, you know? That's the thing. It's literally just going like, if you were, you know, if me and you were roommates, and whatever, I mean, I guess in this example, I'm even making it voluntary in my example, which isn't good. But like, if me and you were roommates and we had some collective pool, like we had, you know, we had a refrigerator, but we both buy groceries every month and put all of our groceries in the refrigerator and in the cabinets. And we go, this is like a commons here. Okay. Now, if you.
Dream made a good point. Even the so-called illegal immigrants are not free from a lot of the theft and a lot of the taxes. Now, certainly they are free in certain areas from certain taxes, like in Texas, for example. Well, no, not even that. Like if they rent, they're paying property tax. They're just paying property tax through their rent to the property owner. Crap, I'm getting heavy. Got too much stuff. This has never happened to me in this game. Yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
You want to invite someone in, you agree that you're responsible for whatever they eat, right? So that the costs aren't imposed on me, and vice versa. Now, if you want to like take it to another level, it's like, actually there's some fucking criminal who forces us to fucking robs from us and then buys all this stuff and puts it in there and go, hey, if you're inviting someone in, it's like, hey man, if they're coming in and taking all that shit, then they're in effect robbing me. Now, they're not guilty of robbing from me. They didn't do it. They just ate the shit that was there. But still, it's like, yeah, it's a better simulation of what's fair for you to have to cover the costs of the person you invited in. So anyway, let's continue. It's not an absurd argument, writes David Friedman, but the notion of indirect liability, that it depends on his implications, that I do not think that it depends on has implications that I do not think either Hoppa or his supporters would accept. If I sell you a gun, I am an indirect cause of any crimes you would commit with it.
What?
Should I be permitted to do so only if I agree to be liable for the costs of such crimes?
Well, I disagree with
If
that,
I
but
sell
we're not
you a
doing
car,
Hoppa today. And if
the
any of you want me,
normal
well,
legal rule in a free society.
so many people asked me to talk about Mark Passio's work. I did that. Many people have asked me to talk about this border issues with Dave Smith, doing that now. A lot of people have also asked me to talk about Hoppa and Hoppianism and stuff like that. That's a complicated thing because what Hoppa espouses and what Hoppians espouse, I have found, are usually very different things. If you guys have a specific work, a specific video or something that you'd like me to do this for, send it to me on Discord.
Is that individuals are responsible for their own offenses. There is no obvious reason why the rule for immigration should be different. And okay, there is an obvious reason. because we exist in a society where
he just said the words.
We are under a status paradigm, and there are these obvious costs imposed. So, like, yes, if you sell an object to another private person and they take that object, it is not clear. They're not bringing them into a system where there is like all of these laws about how your gun must be cleaned at taxpayer expense and must be stored at taxpayer expense and all of these things. And if there were, then maybe this analogy wouldn't be so ridiculous. But no, it's not like it's a completely different thing to say that, like, I sell a piece of property to another individual and therefore I'm responsible for everything they do. You're talking about bringing someone else into a system where there is going to be this burden on the population.
No,
that's a very different.
Here's the
situation.
disanalogy.
That's, again, it's like it's.
He's talking about like we are bringing people into a system. No. I'm Patrick. I live here in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. I am not calling up Mexicans and being like, "Hey, come on in." I'm just existing, minding my own business, and they are existing, minding their own business. And holy, what even was that? What the hell is that? Whew. That's scary looking. Sorry, we have these jump scare moments in the game and it totally distracts me. Let's get back to what we were doing.
It's as if David Friedman, who's very brilliant, but it's as if he's just not recognizing what the point is. The point is that...
Oh yeah, we're not bringing people in.
Libertarians are objecting to.
So, and I understand what Hoppa's going for here, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because, again, I'm not rebutting Hoppa's covenant community conception right now. But, you know, if I was bringing somebody in to someone else's private property and I was choosing to vouch for them for that purpose, then these arguments apply. See that headshot? Just saying that was a headshot. Then these arguments would apply. But that's never going to be the vast majority of people. The vast majority of people, oh shit, are just going to be traveling the world, being people, doing people things. This got spicy really quick, didn't it? All right.
Is the
Drop my gun.
imposition on other people. The involuntary imposition on other people who are going to have to pay for all of this. That's kind of the issue. That it's not a voluntary transaction. Selling someone a gun.
So you have to stay clear on who's doing the aggression here. And it's not me, as a libertarian, suggesting that we not use force on people. Again, all of these words and attempts at arguments are just trying to fucking scare the hell out of me. These guys just keep coming? What? The point is you don't get to initiate force on peaceful people. And you don't get to control property that you don't own. And I'm repeating myself, so.
Is a strictly private voluntary transaction. Inviting someone into the country, saying that you will pay them a wage and then they will drive on public roads and go to public schools and go to emergency rooms and all of this, that's not a strictly private voluntary, interaction. That's the point.
Also, if someone were to walk into a gun store and say, hey, looking to shoot up that school down the block, what do you recommend? What's good? What can I jam a door
Now
with?
you would be culpable if you sold them a gun. Because you gave them knowledge.
Then you kind of maybe have...
Same with the car example. If someone goes, hey, I'm looking to run over a bunch of people, I want to drive this into the wrong side of traffic. How can I take out the most cars? So to me, the immigration example, like we know they're going to be using, it's what you were saying, that we know they're going to be using public utilities.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Hive's proposal makes little sense in other ways. Unless he intends immigrants to function like slaves or indentured servants, working for a single employer or those he lends them out to, they will be engaged like other people in multitudes of voluntary transactions with lots of different people. It makes no sense for all of those transactions to hinge on the permission of a single sponsor who could presumably withdraw the permission anytime he chooses, or if he cannot, is liable for acts over which he has no control. I don't think any of that is any part of Hoppa's proposal. The proposal is just that if you invite someone into a state of society, you're kind of on the hook for whatever costs they impose on the taxpayer. I don't think it implies at all that they're going to work.
We're not saying anything new, guys. Should I end the stream, or you want to keep going?
Proposal, it didn't even have to be an employer who was bringing them in. It was just a citizen.
Also, it's a nice way of showcasing that there's real demand for it. So if you go back to his gun example, if they made it that I guess someone had to sign off on it. Like, think about it. There's enough demand for guns. The NRA would probably come up with the system where they're pre-screening you and then basically signing off on it. And then you'd have like an insurance fund for the liability. Same with cars. Imagine if someone needed to sign off on your ability to have a car. Well, that would suck because then we'd all work jobs where your employer essentially would sign off on that. So it would kind of filter the same thing for immigration, that if there was such demand, like you're saying it's voluntary. So yeah, if there was such voluntary demand that people wanted immigrants in here, they probably would be willing to sign off on that. And it's not like one person would have to assume the cost. You'd probably end up with an insurance fund for it.
Yeah, that's quite possible. I just think that it's not. I don't know. I just think this whole paragraph was kind of goofy. I don't think it implies at all. If you were like,
I'm not really inclined to spend any time on it either.
As a company, even, let's say that's the only example he's really thinking about here, not as an individual, right? But as a company, if you were sponsoring somebody,
save it for a Hoppa discussion.
To like say, okay, I will sponsor this guy because you now are incentivized to have to be that confident that he's going to not impose costs on the taxpayer. I don't think it is you can deduce from that therefore they will only ever be working for you forever. I just don't think that's clear. It might just be like, oh no, this guy's going to bring a lot of value to my company and I'm fairly confident that he's an upstanding member of society, and it's a bet, just like businesses make all the time. Like, I don't know, this guy's valuable to me and therefore I'm willing to take the risk that he's like, I'm fairly confident that he's not like a violent criminal and that he can pay his own way through his kids' education and his healthcare and things like that. That's all that I think is implied. Okay. The third line of argument is that as long as some property is owned by the government is entitled to control its use. I just don't know exactly that I would put it that way. As long as some property is owned by the government is entitled to control its use. My argument would be, as long as some property is owned by the government does control its use. Not that it's entitled to, that it does. That's the reality of the situation. Like, in other words, if you own a house and you say, there's no rules in this house, that is in fact a rule.
An awesome rule.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I've already rebutted this, so I'm just gonna keep listening.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. It's awesome if it's not your house. It's not so awesome if it's your house, right? But if you say that is a rule. The rule is that there's no rules, right? Because like anyone who actually owns a house has rules in their house. So it's not that you're entitled to. I'm just saying that it is. It's not that I think you ought to be allowed to do it, or that you're
really not going to be able to take this gun, am I?
Is that distinction clear? I'm not saying they're entitled to. I'm not saying the government is entitled to, set rules about what you can do on public property. I'm saying no matter what they do, they are, as long as there is public property, they are doing that. Okay. So, as Dave Smith points out, an adult man does not have the right to go into the girls' room of a public school, government property, is not and should not be a commons. Hence, the government may, if it chooses, refuse to allow immigrants it has not approved to use public property. Since public property includes almost the entire highway system, that makes it hard for an immigrant not approved by the government to do anything in the country much beyond employment in a farm or the border. Okay. I don't exactly get what he's saying here. I mean, I don't understand the system where the government lets an immigrant in, but then doesn't let them use the highway system.
Yeah, this is less coherent.
Okay. Here again, the argument proves too much. The government's control of the public school is accepted because it is for the purpose of school, the same purpose it would have if private. The government's control of public school is accepted. I don't know if it's accepted. It's forced. You have no choice. No one really accepted it. I mean, I suppose you could say they accepted the force, but no, it's not exactly accepted. And it's not accepted because it is for the purpose of the school, the same purpose it would have if private. Well, okay. I mean, even if you're going to say that, which I don't exactly agree with, but then, okay, the purpose of the border is to keep people out. The same purpose it would have if privatized. What is the purpose of private borders? What are the purpose of a fence that you put up around your house? What's the purpose of that? It's to keep people out, right? So, okay, I mean, you can make the same argument for borders. Most people, almost certainly most libertarians, would be outraged if the school announced that the girls' room was only available to girls whose parents promised not to own firearms, or not to publicly criticize the mayor, or not to do something else that they were legally entitled to do. In that case, the control over public property would be being used.
I guess this is just going to be
of that
a little more
property,
story time.
but
Looks
as
like
a
the video's
way
almost
of,
over.
Coercing people. All right. So there's a couple things to say about this, right?
Yeah, it is getting heavy.
Number one is that this argument of what the purpose of the fucking thing is, this is just goofy and so removed from reality, and it falls apart right away. So number one,
goofy,
what do you mean
removed
by the
from reality
purpose of that property? Do you mean the stated purpose or what the real purpose is? Because that's a very different argument altogether. So you could say that the purpose of public schools is to educate children, but maybe the purpose is really to indoctrinate children into the state, right? So what are we going with? What the purpose, the stated purpose is, what the real purpose might be, or what in effect the purpose, in effect what this does, right? So I would argue that the stated purpose is to educate children. The real purpose might well just be to indoctrinate a generation of young, malleable minds. And the effect is certainly the latter.
Yeah, agreed.
But even if you're going with the stated purpose, well, what's the stated purpose of the border? I mean, what politician has ever won office promising open borders and zero immigration restrictions? Any major office ever? Even Joe Biden is telling people don't come. Barack Obama was talking about how we need look at what Bill Clinton said on immigration, or any of them. I mean, what does this mean? Well, you're deciding that the purpose of public schools is really such a noble thing.
Shit.
And then, of course,
what is that?
I guess what's even more important than that is this idea that he goes so I'm making the point in my central argument, as I stated at the beginning, right, that the idea that libertarians have to believe that all public property should have zero restrictions on it.
We're just repeating ourselves now. I've already
from libertarian ideology, right? Like
thoroughly,
it
I think, successfully rebutted this.
If you believe in self-ownership and the non-aggression principle and private property rights, whether you agree with that from a moral perspective or a consequentialist perspective, either one, if that's what you believe, it does not follow from that then if somebody aggresses on you, robs your money and creates something with it, that should then be unrestricted and belong to everybody. That does not follow.
Yes,
in
it does.
the same sense that, like, if I
because property title,
you,
like I said earlier, because property title doesn't transfer when coercion is involved. So it's not like your money gets stolen, the thief buys a car, and the car is used to run an Uber that makes some money, which the person then uses to buy a phone. It's not like the phone belongs to you. No. The money that was stolen from you belongs to you. When that money was used to buy a car, that transaction was invalid because it was using stolen resources. The same reason the government doesn't have rightful ownership of it over anything is because all of the transactions that it takes place in are using either stolen resources and or coercion. Property title doesn't transfer when coercion is involved. And even if it did, let's just say ad arguendo, and I'm repeating myself, even if it did, just for the sake of argument, you still don't get to non-consensually communalize the property of all the other victims. All it takes is one.
Okay, if I mug you, Rob, and I take your wallet and I run down the street, it does not follow now that wallet belongs to the world equally. Like, the correct answer from a libertarian perspective is that is rightfully yours and should be returned to you.
Right.
So in the same sense, if the domestic population is robbed regularly to build something, it does not follow from that thing that was built now belongs to the world or is now the commons. Okay, that doesn't follow.
He's arguing in the other direction.
That is not the libertarian position that the government property ought to have zero restrictions on it. Now, for David Friedman
no.
I don't know if he thinks this is clever.
There isn't an ought to have zero restrictions. It's that no one has standing to impose restrictions. It's arguing from the other angle, the other side of the equation.
Something to go, well, yeah. But what if there were restrictions that were really horrible that you didn't like? Okay, well, what if they were to say that once you're saying that, here, let me read this again so I can really get into most people, almost certainly most libertarians, would be outraged if the school announced that the girls' room was only available to girls whose parents promised not to own firearms or not to publicly criticize the mayor. Or is that okay? Yeah, I'm not arguing that what follows from someone robbing you of your money is that now they can make, like if I argue someone mugs you, I'm saying it's not deduced from libertarian principles that your wallet belongs to the world. I'm also not saying that it's now deduced from that it belongs to whoever specifically the mugger says it does. Like, yes, I'm not saying, because I argue that zero restrictions on public property are not the correct libertarian position, that doesn't mean that I'm arguing that any restrictions are great. Yes, those restrictions are insane and would be very, very bad, right? Like this, it makes no sense to make this argument, and it's very weird to see such a brilliant intellectual like David Friedman making this point. Yeah, of course there could be restrictions that were terrible. There could be rules on public property that we would all be opposed to. It doesn't follow from saying that that we don't have to support there being no rules on public property, that, well, we must support any rules that the government comes up with.
Yeah, he's saying it from the other side, which makes it sound more plausible, but it doesn't follow, because you have to have rightful standing to impose, to violently impose rules for property. Make no mistake, that's what we're talking about.
Way of thinking.
We're talking about violently imposing our behavioral norms. In this case, let's say doing drugs in a school, on people that are not trespassing, not aggressing, just behaving in a way that you don't like. We're talking about imposing violence on those people on property that we have no standing to control. That is unlibertarian.
Well, this line of thinking could justify any type of status policy. And it's like, well, okay, but you know, to the flip side, the extreme, if there's no restrictions on government property, what could that justify? That could justify, like I said, people shooting heroin up in the middle of a third grade classroom. Okay,
so
that's
stop
not
sending your kids to a
practical,
place
and
where
obviously the other
heroin addicts
extreme
could
isn't
shoot up
practical.
in.
So what can libertarians support in the meantime? While we fight to eliminate all public government property, okay,
in the meantime, support whatever you want as long as it's not incompatible with libertarian principles
that are more closely simulated to what a free society ought to look like. That's where you end up. If you reject both of those extremes, that's where you end up with a common ground. We don't think government should exist at all. We don't think taxation should exist at all. But while it does, let's try to do this in the least bad way possible. I don't get what's crazy about that. And this idea that it's like, yeah, okay, sure. Like, if you say that a homeless guy, you know, can't run into a library and start jerking off and smoking crack in front of anyone. Well, if the government could say that, they could also say that, you know, black people can't read in the library. Like, okay, yes, I guess one restriction. If you justify one restriction, well, do they have the right to another restriction? It's like, okay, well, I'm for the first one and against the second one. So how about that?
Yeah. So
What do you want me to say? Neither of these situations are libertarian.
I think he was
I'm just gonna
attempting
pick
to
which
defend his
one I
inconsistent
think is
position,
better
but
for
I think he just
society.
exposed it, actually.
I don't think this is. I don't know. I find it very weird that this is David Friedman's response. Okay. Similarly here, if roads were private, their owners might require some form of a driver's license in order to make their roads safer. If the roads are public, it is not unreasonable for them to require a driver's license and refuse to allow an immigrant without one to drive. But that does not justify forbidding a legal driver from carrying the immigrant. What Smith's argument is proposing is that government using its control over public property, not to serve the purposes of that property, but to prevent voluntary transactions between its citizens and foreigners. No, I'm not. I'm not arguing that they should prevent voluntary transactions. I'm trying to prevent involuntary transactions. That's the whole fucking point.
The ones
that David Friedman, this brilliant guy, seems to have completely missed.
No.
And this is the whole point of HOPPA. The whole point is to...
This is a reduction thing. He's trying to prevent involuntary transactions that he doesn't like while allowing, even temporarily, the ones he's okay with.
prevent the involuntary transaction.
Inconsistency.
Suppose we accept the argument. A private owner is entitled to refuse to allow anyone not vaccinated onto his property. Hence, the government is entitled to impose a vaccine mandate enforced by forbidding anyone not vaccinated from using public property. It is entitled to effectively lock urban residents into their homes by forbidding them from using the public roads or sidewalks. It is entitled to ban drug use, prostitution, very nearly any of the activities libertarians believe it is not entitled to ban by denying the people who do those things access to public property. The exception swallows the rule. I conclude that libertarians ought to support open borders.
He nailed
they
that.
may want to qualify that by including the condition that immigrants not receive all the rights of citizens, such as the right to vote or to receive government benefits until they have been
I am moving very
naturalized.
slow because my pack's heavy.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm standing.
So I guess in conclusion, what David Friedman builds up to this whole time is this argument, which really sucks. Argument is just so fucking weak.
Oh, it's
And
weak
again,
and it
I
sucks,
say as
guys.
somebody, a tremendous amount of respect for David Friedman and
Checkmate.
the work he's done over the years. But the argument that, well, if you don't accept that there's zero restrictions on government property, then you have to accept any restrictions on government property. Just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, guys.
Like, it's real binary thinking for
It's
such
binary
a growing
thinking that doesn't make sense, and it's a
No.
weak argument.
I can say that zero restrictions make no sense, and lots of restrictions would be unreasonable and make no sense.
It's not
And as a
reasonable.
libertarian, and David Friedman is an anarchist, right? So as a libertarian who doesn't think government property should exist to begin with, it's very easy to say, ideally, there would be no government property. Since there is government property, I can prefer this use of it to this use of it. There's no logical contradiction with that. So I can say that
Wish I had that meme. It's
yeah,
just your
I would,
opinion,
for example,
man.
some of the ones that I've used before that piss
You
some
can
people off.
assault
I
up to
think
and
if there
including
is a
murdering
government,
somebody
like if there's a
because you
public
find it reasonable.
playground for little kids, I don't think drug users should be allowed there. I think if someone's using drugs there, they should be kicked off. By the way, I think if someone goes to a fucking playground, that's a public playground, and they don't have a kid there, there's just some strange guy sitting on the bench watching all the kids.
Now we're
I have
just
no problem
getting a
with him doing
tour
that.
through his opinions on
I
how
also
other people
think
should be
that if they
forcibly
were
controlled
to
on
then
property
say,
he doesn't own.
Well,
This is
we want, I don't know, anyone
exciting.
vaccinated to leave. I'd be like, oh, no, I'm against that. I'm for that restriction, against that restriction, against no restrictions. There's nothing in that contradicts.
marks the distinction between the ones he
only
accepts and doesn't
libertarian answer
accept.
is that this should be privatized.
Yeah, he thinks they're reasonable.
That's the only actual libertarian answer. It does not follow at all that because I think it should be privatized, I must believe there should be no restrictions, or if I don't believe there should be no restrictions, I must
just-
support any restrictions. That's stupid.
Oh, it's stupid. Your
David Friedman is
inconsistency being highlighted.
That argument
That's
is
stupid. Oh,
That's
that
the
argument is stupid. Wow,
He made
guys.
one, note. That's
Wow.
the end of
Do I ever do this?
the article.
Man, if
he
I
made
ever
one
do
note
this,
which
I
doesn't
really
help at
hope you
all.
guys call me out.
Dave Smith responded to the
Oh,
argument about
that was disappointing.
about using controls of government property against drug users raised by Spike Cohen in their debate by saying that it was legitimate to forbid addicts from shooting up on government property. He did not consider that the same argument would justify forbidding anyone who shot up anywhere, including his own property, from ever using government property. It's just the same dumb argument.
Oh, it's dumb,
I'm
guys.
saying that here's
It's
basically the
unreasonable,
point.
stupid,
Zero
and dumb and
restrictions
ridiculous.
On
Am I
government
forgetting any of
property.
his rock
not
solid
reasonable.
rebuttals?
Lots of other restrictions on government property are not reasonable. I'm fine with supporting reasonable restrictions on government property. And what are reasonable?
Oh, and the
restrictions?
Democrats are fine with supporting
Okay.
reasonable gun control.
I understand it's not as black and white as
It's
lots
just
of
inconsistent.
libertarian theory is. But while me or you, Rob, might think it's horrible for heroin to be illegal, right? Like that's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing to take someone who's like a heroin addict and then say, well, our solution to this is we're going to lock you in a cage for 20 years. It's awful. It's like on the level of slavery, immoral and barbaric, and just horrible for society. But it's completely reasonable as long as we have a government building for them to say, you can't shoot up heroin in this building. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to ask you to leave if you shoot up heroin here. And that much better simulates what we'd likely think would happen in a free private society. But yeah, you know, I couldn't like ruin your life forever and lock you in a cage, but I could tell you got to leave my property. Okay? Now, Friedman can say, well, by that logic, if they could do that, they could ban you. They could also ban anyone who's ever shot up heroin on their private property from ever using public property. Yeah, okay, yes. If your point was to say that Dave makes the point that it's unreasonable to have zero restrictions on public property, but he's probably never thought of the fact that there could be unreasonable restrictions on public property. All right, you got me. I feel like, yeah, no, obviously.
I think
that's so obvious that maybe I never stated it in the debate. I think I might have.
I think he knows that he's got an
Actually, I think I did.
untenable
But
position here. That's why he
regardless,
keeps
it should just
going
be
over
so
this.
obvious to anyone.
Just
Yeah,
so
of
obvious,
course.
stupid.
In the same sense that people go,
Like,
and
if
I've
he
heard
just
this before from
repeats
people,
this
they go,
milieu
so you're not
enough,
for open borders, so you're
maybe
for
we'll
closed
just
borders.
feel
You're
like
for
he's
zero
right enough
immigration.
to not call him on
Like
it.
as if those are your only two choices. I have to be for unlimited immigration or zero. Or
Can I be
no
for hot chicks that need green cards?
Yeah, there you go. There's your middle ground. Rob Bernstein just found your middle ground. Anyway, I don't know what else to say about this, but I'm like I said at the very beginning, I understand. I've risen to, whatever. This is probably the biggest libertarian podcast like in that's out there. I don't know. I guess it depends on how you define.
Which is why I'm taking the time
I know
to
that I am like
rebut one of your bad
like,
positions.
Me to be the presidential candidate
because you're out there representing libertarianism poorly.
A big part of just took over the party, and okay, I get that. I'm still Dave. I'm still just like in my mind like a soldier in the Ron Paul army, whatever. And like a comic, like but so it's weird to me to see Milton Friedman's kid like writing a piece about me. What's even weirder is to see this such a bad fucking argument.
Oh, it's a bad argument, guys, too. It's bad.
Weak argument, like is this binary thing that he closes.
It's binary and bad and stupid.
I don't know. Just kind of bizarre
and ridiculous.
Look, I said
and bizarre
before.
Don't forget bizarre.
I'd be happy to have a conversation with David Friedman. I'd be happy to go back and forth with him about this stuff.
Is he serious?
Kind of needed to be addressed, and so that was the show today. Still really admire David Friedman and think so much of his work is incredible. Highly recommend people go look him up and read his stuff. But this was not this one ain't it. All right,
it's not it.
Okay, that's our episode for today. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll be back real soon.
Huh. Well, ladies and gentlemen, those were words. I don't know. Yeah. So, let me conclude by looping back around just to make sure that everybody's clear. Dave Smith is one of the best people in the world at describing and espousing and defending libertarian principle to the world, to the general public. I don't even think you can question that. And he's certainly done an amazing job on many topics, on major shows like Joe Rogan. And the awesomeness of that cannot be overstated. Important and awesome, and he's really good. And you know what? He's wrong on this. And hopefully I've proved and illustrated precisely where and why and how he's wrong on it, and exposed his complete and utter lack of an actual argument on this topic repeatedly, probably so many times that most of you aren't even watching anymore. I don't know. I can't see the viewer count right now, so could just be one of you for all I know. So hopefully I've made the case. I've properly rebutted it. Look, I bet I'm wrong on something. No one's going to be perfect. Everyone is fallible. In fact, the reason why I spend so much time inviting people on the show to challenge me when they disagree is because if I'm wrong, I really, really want to find out where and how. And just like Dave Smith and David Friedman are going back and forth, refining libertarian principle, that's what I'm doing too, and that's my purpose too. Respectfully, friendly, as much as I can with all the ridiculousness. Yeah. So, I mean, that's why we're here. I'm not saying that Dave Smith is not a libertarian. I'm saying that he's definitely not perfectly consistent, and I've illustrated precisely how he's not perfectly consistent in his libertarian position. All right, so I've got some tedious weapon stuff left to do, so I'm going to hang out. We can call the official stream over for now, but I'm going to hang out with you guys and kind of put away and clean up all my weapons now after having gone on the adventure. So if you guys have any questions, put questions in all caps, and I will chat with you guys while I kind of wrap this up here. I think that says, I don't know what that name is, but can you summarize his position that you are rebutting? Good question. So there are externalities involved in immigrants coming from other countries that are not accrued to those immigrants. Most of the externalities, especially the ones he's complaining about, are incurred due to government coercion and coercive programs. Think welfare, road maintenance, public schools, libraries, national defense, let's say. Like, these are all externalities, and the costs of which are not accruing to the people that are, let's say, because I'm amping his argument here, right? That are not accruing to the people benefiting from them. And that is, that's called a moral hazard. And supporting anything that increases the damages resulting from that moral hazard cannot be, well, see, all he would have said is ridiculous, is unreasonable, is stupid. So supporting anything that increases the damages of those externalities is ridiculous. Argument provided by Dave Smith, TM. And I'm not trying to be disingenuous. That's literally summarizing the hour and a half we just listened to, including his justification of ridiculousness. And I didn't hear a stronger justification than name calling, and even going so far as to saying it doesn't need to be defended, which is basically just admitting defeat, like going out of your way to admit defeat, or admit that you don't have an argument. If it is so simple to rebut, then you could just do it real quick without the name calling, without the adjectives. So hopefully that helped. Stiggs. Okay, got you, Stiggs. All right. How do you think we should handle immigration? A solution, that is. How do I think we should handle immigration? The answer is to get rid of the coerced, sourced negative externalities, which is the government, obviously. You stop coercion at the border. You stop coercion for the purposes of welfare. You stop coercion for taxes. You have people defend themselves when agents of the state come to impose those costs of those negative externalities on you, using the most peaceful means available, let's just say, for YouTube's sake. And yeah, I mean, the solution is to end the government coercion that is both the source and cause of all the problems that we've talked about. And unfortunately, coercion just sucks. And coercion causes lots of myriad collateral damage, endless collateral damage. Like, it rolls down and spiders through every relationship and exchange and piece of property that you own. It's everywhere. It's become ubiquitous. It's the water we swim in because government coercion is so pervasive now. And that sucks. And because it really sucks, doesn't mean that we now get to initiate new force and make new victims out of peaceful people because we're getting attacked. Just because the cartel is threatening you doesn't mean that we also get to try and have other people get threatened, to make our threats be a little less. That's, well, narcissistic is too strong of a word, but that's not morally justified. So hopefully that answered your question. Let me know if you disagree. Happy to hear it. Okay. I've got tons of bullets here. Oh, I've got armor piercing rounds now. That's cool. 9x18. Ooh, armor piercing for the Glock. That's even cooler. 9x19. Oh no, not for the Glock. There. Nine by 39. I don't even know what gun that's for. Is that an SMG round? Don't know. Pop quiz audience. What's a 9x39 round for? I think you did a very mature and good rebuttal of Dave Smith's position on borders and property ownership. Hopefully he sees this and takes it as a constructive criticism for himself. Yeah, absolutely. Just like I would attempt to take criticism of any of my positions. I believe Shepard owes me a couple rebuttals. He thinks I'm wrong on a couple things. He thinks I'm wrong on evictions during evictions for rape babies, which is a position I very much hope I'm wrong on. So I look forward to him educating me on that. And I think he said he disagrees with me on something else soon. So hopefully we'll have him on. People that disagree with me, professionally, politely, constructively, front of the line, they get right on the show. Would you agree that the war on drugs created cartels when they went after? Well, yeah, absolutely. Like the cartels wouldn't have a business. Or if they did have a business, they would be competing with a bunch of other people. A great example of what happens when you provide people access to trade is, what round is that? This game has so many different types of ammo. 7.6225. Okay. Ross Ulbricht, on the Silk Road. For the first time, anonymous people around the world could safely compete with the cartels. And the bigger these darknet markets get, the more peaceful the cartels necessarily have to get, because they don't know who to go and attack. They can't. It's anonymous. And so it opens the market up to competition. Now the cartel can't keep their prices high by murdering all their competition. Now the cartel has to compete on a level playing field with all these other anonymous people. And the fact that this happened when the darknet markets came out sort of really gives you a proof case of that. And if the market was totally free, then it would certainly be even better. So yeah, the degree to which the markets are forced into not being free is the degree that you empower terrible people like the cartels. Make no mistake, they are some terrible ass people. Nine by 39 is a Soviet rifle round, carbine. Subsonic rifle round for dedicated snipers. Oh. Yeah, and then the FBI screwed Ross over. Yeah, sure. Like, everybody's all on about Assange right now, but, I mean, he's not in prison. I mean, actually, I think he is. Look, I'm not trying to say that came out wrong. They should both absolutely be free. But I'm hearing a lot more noise about Assange. And it's because the general public is still more down on drugs than they should be. Like, Ross did an amazing thing for the world through his darknet market by, literally subjecting the cartels against their consent, subjecting them to competition. That's pretty amazing. Who else could have done that? That's awesome. Yeah, he's my hero in a lot of ways. No question. No question. And I've talked about this on the show before. Especially like when I was supporting his mother. My heart really goes out to her because she reminds me of my mother. And I certainly had the technological capability to do the things that Ross did. And it could have been me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, so I empathize with that entire situation significantly, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The murder for hire, if that's even true, and it's questionable that it is, well, I've done the moral analysis of that particular situation. It's a complicated situation. It's a bunch of criminals trying to extort him, and and him having a complete lack of ability to seek any kind of normal justice that we would be able to get in a free society because the government wants it that way. So anyway, my summary on that, and this is the summary, not the details, of course, but I didn't see a problem with it. 16 kilograms was 35 pounds. Oh, really? Oh, that's why I was moving so slow. Thank you. Thank you for giving me that in freedom units, ANCAP. I appreciate it. Phobia says 9x39 is a rifle round. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. We got a brand new shotgun I'm excited about here. Let's get this thing cleaned up. This is almost my favorite part of the game, guys. Just like coming back after a dangerous adventure and like cleaning my gear and like taking care of it. And this is really fun. The immersion in this game is off the charts. It's one of the most immersive games I've played in VR. Maybe the most. How do we do the barrel? There we go. Thought I was going to saw that thing. I already have a sawed off. So I'm looking forward to having a longer range shotgun. I don't think borders are productive to the life forms running around on this rock. Yeah, well. Here we go. This is certainly being a pain in the ass. Never had this. There we go. Here I was bragging about how immersive this was. Okay. Getting it figured out, maybe. There we go. Okay. Look at that. Perfect condition shotgun. Yeah, buddy. That's going to be good. Oh, yeah. All right, I guess I don't... Do I need this one anymore? Should I carry both? No, that'd be too much weight, wouldn't it? How much does this gun weigh? All right, 7.6, 11.2. Okay, or... Oh, so it's an extra pound. I think it's worth it. This has nothing to do with the topic of the video. But I'm having fun. This is really just Patrick talking over a video of Michael J. Fox trying to play video games. Okay. Yeah, guys, so let me know. We'll do a Hoppa video next. Give me some content that really represents his positions. And I'll check it out. Do I have 2 of these? Oh, that would be cool. Two perfect condition sawed-offs. I like it. Probably sell one. The theory of, is that one title? The theory of socialism and capitalism and democracy, the god that failed. Nice. At this level of VR, you might as well just clean some real guns and go hunting. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, like, hopefully this video will be useful for people. Like, they don't have to stick around for this part if they're just interested in the Dave Smith border part. So that was the idea. There's something about having a clean gun. Oh, this one's low on ammo. We can't have that. Can we? Boom. Beautiful. Oh, we need one in the chamber. What? Oh, my bad. Where'd the round go? Oh, I lost a round. Crap. Oh, found it. Aha. OCD Patrick is good again. All right, guys. I think we'll call it there. That was fun. Let me know in the chat, in the comments, if you like this format of video. Certainly weird. Don't see a lot of this on the internet, but it is my thing, so that's cool. I will hang out with you guys on Discord. Oh, FYI, there's a new thing out that I've talked about once before, but I'll talk about it again. So in my constant search for people, for platforms that will not ban me and ban our content and cut off my associations with my friends and people that I want to talk to and people that want to talk to me. Years ago, there's a guy named Ija I know, and I've known for a long time, and I've used his software in the past. He's one of the greatest cryptographers in the world, let's say, and he's been making software for people to communicate directly with each other, end-to-end encrypted, share files with each other. He's been making that kind of software for years. His original software, very few people have heard about. It's called Demon Saw. And then several years ago, he formed a company called Code Siren to make a new piece of software called Rift. And I'm trying to be careful because I can't disclose everything yet. But it's a very exciting piece of software. You can think of it like a complete Discord replacement. So I'm talking a community chat server, file sharing. It's going to have voice communications, voice chat, things like that. So like a Slack replacement, a Discord replacement, Matrix for people that are familiar with that. It's so much better than Matrix. The software is in closed beta right now. And I can't talk too much about what I'm going to be doing just yet. I'm forming a new company that is going to be helping people host instances of this piece of software for their communities. So again, the best description of it is like a Discord replacement that is self-hostable, end-to-end encrypted, super secure, actually easy to use with a really good user interface. It's in closed beta. To my knowledge, I am one of the only people in the world that has access to the closed beta, and I've opened it up to my Disenthrall. I just smacked myself in the face. To my Disenthrall community. So, if you would like to have to be part of this closed beta, hop on our Discord server. There's a link in the description. Talk to Fallstar, my producer, and he will give you the info you need to get access to it. This thing is going to be huge. It's not going to be out of closed beta probably until end of first quarter next year. But you can see how it's coming along, and you can see how amazing it's going to be and how empowering it's going to be for communities like ours. And so it's my intention to start this new business to help freedom and liberty-minded people around the world have this community server if they don't have the skills or willpower or time to host it themselves. So that's all coming over the next 3 to 6 months. I'll keep you updated on that. And if you want closed beta access, you are one of the few people in the world that can actually get it right now. So hop on Discord, talk to Fallstar. It's Windows only. The Windows only app right now is the only one that's available. The Android and iOS and Linux ones, I believe, are going to be coming later this year for closed beta. But right now it's Windows only, and it's got to be, I think, Windows 10 onward for this current. This is like the second closed beta that they've had. So we're still really early on. Not all the features are there yet, but if you want to get it. It's really good. I'm excited about it. Like, you can share files. You can have like file spaces where you have files on the server that anybody can come along and download. Oh, it's great. It's great. And it's not owned by Tencent, like literally everything is. Okay. I'm actually going to end the stream now. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you've enjoyed the format, and I hope you appreciated the content. And I hope that if you disagree with me, you will hit me up and let me know so you can come on the show and teach me something new that I don't know now. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Let's see. How do I get out of here? Uh-oh. What is that? That doesn't look good. That looks like the... That doesn't look good. Okay, hold on. I got to figure out how to get out of here. Let's see. Can we see my desktops? Uh-oh, did OBS crash? Where is it? Oh, okay. Woo! I guess it got minimized. All right, guys.